Good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, September 10th, 2025, and I am going to call to order the tri-board meeting of the Sutton Select Board, the Sutton School Committee, and the Sutton Finance and Warrant Advisory Committee. This is a formal meeting for each of these boards, and in a few minutes they will call together regular meetings of their boards separately after we get through a little bit of overhead. But before we do that, I would like to kind of spend a minute and explain what it is we're doing here tonight. Regular watchers of this space might not have come across a tri-board meeting in the past, so maybe it makes a little bit of sense to spend a couple minutes on what we're doing here. Most of the people I suspect sitting here know why we're here, but for purposes of the public who may ultimately be watching this, I thought it might help. So this is not a hybrid meeting tonight. Because we have so many people here, we didn't have a facility. We needed a facility where we could put everybody together. But this facility here at the Senior Center doesn't have the technology to be able to stream this live, so there is no participation from outside available tonight. So anybody that's here and participating in the meeting is present in person. My name is David Hall. Tonight I am serving as independent moderator of this meeting. I don't sit on any of the boards, at least at this time, so and I expect that once we get going, I won't have to do much but sit here. So keep talking about it. Apparently, right after this, hang on a second. Apparently, right after this meeting was publicly posted, the Department of Local Services published in the city and town newsletter that comes out periodically an article on tri-board meetings. And so I read it, and frankly, it did a much better job of sort of getting to the heart of why you might want to do a tri-board meeting than I was going to be able to write, so I thought I might just read it. So a tri-board meeting is highly recommended. The importance of a regular tri-board meetings in towns. This article highlights the importance of regular tri-board meetings in towns that bring together three key policy-making boards: the Select Board, School Committee, and in our case, the Finance and Warrant Advisory Committee. Tri-board meetings are held to bring together a town's three key policy-making boards, the Select Board, which is went through that, to hear critical information at the same time and prevent misunderstandings. They allow for discussions that consider multiple perspectives and needs, potentially leading to more comprehensive and well-rounded decisions, particularly concerning shared resources or town-wide proposals. Increasingly, towns hold tri-board meetings to discuss budget development and important fiscal matters in order to arrive at solutions in advance of town meeting. Beyond immediate budget cycle, these meetings also can provide an opportunity to discuss financial planning, capital needs, and other strategic initiatives. As a matter of best practice and to mitigate unforeseen financial issues, tri-board meetings should be held at least quarterly during the year. Editorializing, this is new to us, so the hope is to have it regularly. The cadence of that will be sort of determined as we go. Topics to cover in these meetings include comprehensive review of prior year's performance, year-to-date activities as they relate to benchmarks, formal policies, and other concerns of the individual boards that would benefit from additional input. Members of the finance team and other department heads would provide analysis, guidance, and technical support to assist decision makers. The tri-board would focus on short and long-term planning efforts, have ample opportunities to discuss issues and engage with the public and solicit feedback. Through regular communication, the boards would build collaboration and cohesiveness, pursue efficient resource management, and contribute to better outcomes that align with the town's overall financial goals and priorities. And lastly, often a community only convenes a tri-board meeting when experiencing urgent financial matters or facing emergency repairs to hear presentations from financial officers, allow public input and questions, and openly discuss options. Once the pressing issue is presumed to be resolved, The inclination is to continue meetings may fade, which is not advisable, which is kind of the past experience in Sutton. We have had occasional tri-board meetings in the past, but usually it was addressing a particular circumstance and only for that purpose, and they didn't continue. And the important, I think, message here tonight is the idea is to try to do this regularly and develop a way to communicate between the boards and the policymakers and hopefully increase communication. The one thing I would add to this, for me, it also increases transparency to the public. It's a good way to sort of inform the public about how policies are made and decisions get made. So, you know, also on the three boards and committees that are represented here tonight, there's been a fair amount of turnover in a short period of time, so I think this is a great opportunity for, you know, for sort of collaboration and learning for all of the members. So the timing, I think, is terrific, and again, I thought that did a nice job of sort of explaining why you might want to do this kind of thing without having to hear it from me. So with that, I think we're ready to kind of move on, and I think each of the boards need to call to order their meetings. So we'll start with the select board.
Sure, thank you. Jesse Lematic, Chairman of the Sutton Select Board. It is 6:09. I'd like to call tonight's meeting of the Sutton Select Board to order. And as we do in our meetings, we always begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I am going to use my privilege as Chairman of the Board of Selectmen and ask that we all rise. There is a flag outside, so we'll look up. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That being said, why don't we do a roll call of the members of the Sutton Select Board?
Jonathan Anderson.
Noah Sharpie.
J. Ben Barnett.
Christine Watkins.
And Jesse Lematic, Chairman and President.
Thank you. Why don't we move to the school committee?
Okay, the time is now 6:09. We'd like to call the September 10th, 2025 meeting of the school committee to order, and we will do a roll call, starting with the end.
Patrick Royce.
Chris McCarrick.
Erin Reed Erickson. Jennifer Darden.
Jill Kozachka.
Thank you, and we'll do the FinCom.
Thank you. I'm Pat Morris. It's now 6:10, so we'll do a roll call. So, George.
George Watson.
Peter Zona.
Gary Primo. Brian Germos.
John Mustier. And Pat Morris, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I think we'll start the proceedings tonight with some comments from Austin Saganowicz. Sorry, let me tell me what I forget.
John. Somebody?
John on the Finance Committee?
No, I didn't miss anything.
Okay, sorry.
He's our secretary. That we're firing him.
Hey, I'm looking for somebody else.
Brian, you're doing great. You're doing a great job.
Sorry. How about if we turn it over to Austin? Town Manager Austin Saganowicz.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate everyone being here. Full disclosure, this is also, the Select Board set my goals, and this is one of them. So I appreciate your participation and contribution towards hopefully me keeping my job and being here tonight. So, you know, really, I think the goal of calling this together is, I think, exactly what you mentioned. We have new administration on the town side, on the school side, some new school committee, well, actually new members on all the boards. So we really want to make sure that all three boards have the opportunity to engage kind of in the same conversation and talk from a common understanding of the overall financial model. And I mentioned the financial model that I've kind of taken from Jim and Tim and tried to kind of make my own a little bit and try to dive into the finances a little bit. So this is also, frankly, a helpful conversation for me to also hear your perspectives as we're working on the model. So this is kind of the rough plan for the presentation. And hopefully it sparks more discussion amongst yourselves, and I can just sit in the corner and hide. But I really, and I kind of been framing this discussion as where we've been, and based off of where we've been, where we are now, and where maybe we'll be going based off of that data. So I'll start with some revenues, not all the revenues, just some of the high-level important ones. Take that into a forecast, put that into a model, and then hopefully spark a discussion, and then we'll talk about the upcoming process as well. So, big part of our revenue is our tax levy, and our tax levy, as everyone knows, grows through Proposition 2.5. It grows 2.5% based off of the current year base, and then we have something called new growth. And new growth is exactly like what you think it is, right? So it's new construction, renovation, rehabilitation, new value added to our properties. So you can see, and really what I've tried to do is show a lot of data here, history going back from what I have based on the DRR website, going back to FY 2009. And you can see that, especially over the past, let's say 10 or so years, we've had a pretty healthy amount of growth to our tax base. FY 17 was a weird one. That was when National Grid completed their power line project, so we had a substantial amount of personal property, and you'll see that reflected in our actual budget growth. But we're consistently adding residential values to our property. And then more recently, especially some of the larger projects that we're all aware of, we've also added, and we've been fortunate to add some commercial value. So how that's reflected is in our actual new growth number that we put into our budget. Now the two figures here, or the two bars here, the red is what we budgeted in the recap. And I think all of you, or most of you are aware, we've been conservative. And I think that's a good thing, because for budgeting purposes, we've been able to live within our means for new growth, but we've been fortunate to generate what is free cash or fund a lot of capital through actual new growth. And that's the 2017 figure where we had over $1 million in actual new growth for the budget. Past few years have been healthy. We believe that our new growth for this year, we budgeted 200. We believe we'll exceed that, but for the purposes, we built the FY 26 budget with a $200,000 new growth model. Local receipts is another category. So this is an interesting one, and I apologize. We'll post this for later so you can zoom in and see some of the details. But local receipts is also a figure where for many years, it's kind of the black line there, you see what we've been budgeting in the recap. There's been many years where we did not meet our budget for local receipts. We're consistent with our motor vehicle excise, but for in FY 2008, 2009, there were many years where we were not meeting our budget. We've most recently been able to exceed our budget. FY 25 unaudited, we're exceeding our estimates by $2.5 million, generating a very substantial free cash figure for the town, just under $4 million. And some of that is tied to, I think, what we've all been aware of, which is a strong economy. Investment income has provided a substantial amount of revenue for the town. Some of the big projects that we're talking about has yielded building permits and other inspectional services permits. And then motor vehicle excise as well has continued to grow. And this is related to, again, the past few years has been a very strong economy for cities and towns in generating local receipts. But again, the average and history, we continue and must continue to be conservative. Now, I think all of us recognize now that the economy has figured itself out. We're in a good spot. This is going to continue, right? It's a joke. But that's a conversation that I want to have with you guys about where do you think we're going? We've got a lot of subject matter experts, a lot of people that are familiar with where we are from a economy, personal finance, business finance, and understanding of municipal government. Your input is going to be valuable for how we build the future here. So in the model that I've gone through, I'm making some assumptions here, but I want to receive your feedback on that as well. So on the expense side, so we're fortunate as well to have a lot of history and actual spending. We've had munis for decades. Not a lot of people have a system that you have all the data in one place. We do, and that's a credit to the town. So I was able to get some expenses that go back all the way to FY 2005. So we've got 20 years of history here. And what I've been trying to recognize is some sort of trend, possibly. But what I've seen over 20 years is great variations. So on the municipal side, we've seen an average of just over a 3.3% increase. Education, just over 3.1%. And our fixed costs, which includes our pension assessment, health insurance, has been just over 7%. We've also seen some great variations though. So with some of the min and the max, right? You've seen years where the town has reduced their budgets. You've seen where we've significantly increased over 10%, and you see same variations with some of the other categories there. So that's 20 years, but 20 years is also not now, right? So I tried to narrow that a little bit and narrow it down to 10 years. We're still continuing to see variations there, but the trend is becoming clear. You're seeing that our average spend across all categories continues to grow, except for debt service, right? But the volatility still exists. We're still seeing, substantial years where there's a large increase that maybe is not exceeding our ability to meet on the revenue side. And then finally, I wanted to look at, well, where have we been since COVID, right? And that's where we're seeing substantial increases, again, across the board. So average increase for the town has been 4.45. Education has been just under that at 3.85. Our fixed costs just under 4%. And again, we're continuing to reduce our debt service as well. And I think the reality of our current budget outlook is becoming more clear about where we are and where we're going. So, this is what I'm calling the EKG chart, because you can see why. This is just the municipal and education percent change for our budgets since 2005. It's all over the place. And to underscore, this is really no way to budget. FY 2008, we did have an override of $500,000. You can see the kind of the large uptick there. And certainly there's similar trends between the town and the school, but there's also, if we're honest, there's also been some years where, there's been some town winners and school losers and vice versa. And when I'm trying to put together and work with you folks to put together a model that makes sense, this is, again, unsustainable. So the thought on the assumptions is to kind of build in some expenditure side limitations there. And I don't know if we'll hash all that out tonight, but I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts. But for the purposes of our models, as I talked about, these are some of the high-level categories of how we put our budget together. So again, growing our tax levy 2.5%. A new growth, which is probably the figure all of you have opinions on for what it should be or what it shouldn't be. Slightly tracking that up a little bit to 250,000. I just want to note for the purposes of the discussion, the average has been just over 450,000. But again, not guaranteed, right? State aid, our average over the time period has been has been 1% year over year, keeping that model. And local receipts, again, to try to be conservative on our estimates, just a modest increase of 1.5% year over year. And for the purposes of operating budgets, not projecting any use of any of our stabilization funds or free cash, not putting any of our capital in here. This is just talking about operating budgets. And on the expense side, this is where things kind of get a little interesting. So I should kind of show those three time periods of 05 to 25, 15 to 25, and 2020 to 2025. I created some expenditure side limitations, and I took the average of the averages, right? So that column there, the far left column within those three charts, I just averaged the three of those for each of these categories. And what that equaled out to is approximately a 3.75 increase for municipal, 3.5% for education, 5.75 for fixed costs, and continuing, if we're not adding any projects, continuing to reduce our debt service. Continuing some of the good efforts that we've done with our transfers out, for example, budgeting and contributing money towards our OPEB liability, and also contributing to some of our other funds like our special ed stabilization, health insurance stabilization, and so forth. And again, not projecting any capital projects for the purposes of the discussion tonight. So the goal is to try to bring budgets with a greater certainty, hopefully, less uncertainty, certainly on the expenditure side, with some expenditure side limitations. And this model allows us to not have to tie it to revenues, right? We can kind of plan where we are on the expense side. So we can benefit from a stable expense environment as our annual recurring revenues, which are really difficult to project in all honesty, can continue or may start to decline as our economy shifts. So, what does that mean? And before I go into that, there's red on the next slide, but that's okay because it's early, right? We haven't started the budget process, but just based off of these assumptions, this is what you'll see. So, with those figures for FY27, based off of the assumptions I just mentioned, just over a $900,000 projected deficit for the town, with those projections on those 4 categories. And you can see, as I forecast that over the next 3 years, certainly if I had more rows for more columns there, that's where we'd be on the on those 4 categories. So that's the 3.75 and 3.5% for the town and the school. And then also I added 0.5%. So on the next slide, I added 0.5% to each of those categories. And obviously, when you're adding and your revenue stays the same, no surprise, your net position gets a little bit worse. So just over $1 million for 27 and continues to grow. So I'm going to stop there and pause there. We have some other slides that just kind of talk about the budget process, which I'll show at the end. But really the goal is to not scare you or to not sway you one way or the other, but to hopefully spark a discussion about what you think about the data from a policy perspective. What are your priorities? What's some of the direction that you'd like to see in developing the budget that the town and school administration can adhere to? Because the budget process, as all of you know, moves very quickly. And we're going to need some direction and input, and that's why we feel it's important to have you all here to talk through some of this. Again, this is high level. If you have some detailed questions that I may not be able to answer for you tonight, we'll definitely follow up with it, but just hopefully an opportunity to ask questions, share your thoughts, and talk amongst yourselves, and then plan for hopefully future discussions. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Austin. So as I open it up to the floor, I guess Deb is in the back trying to keep minutes for this meeting. So to assist her in that work, if we could just start by identifying ourselves and what board we represent, so that you can hopefully sort of keep track of what's going on. So speak as loudly as you can and with a little bit of pace, so she can just keep up. So I will open it up to the floor. I don't know, do you have any opening comments you'd like to make?
Well, my only concern right now is how are we going to proceed through this? We have 15 plus, 20 people or so at the table, and you know, obviously we don't have instances really to do any deep diving, I think, at this point. Again, we're getting the preliminary presentation to us. So how do we want to do it? Do we want to do comments by boards, comments by seniority, comments on whoever raises their hand first?
I think I had a couple of concerns coming into this meeting tonight. So one concern was that we turn it over for people to speak and nobody would say a word. So, you know, if it goes that way, I'd be happy to hear from anybody that would like to throw in some comments. If it gets unwieldy and lots of people want to talk, then we can talk about how it is that we might need to put a little bit of brakes on. You know, one thing in the prep for this meeting, the discussion that we had was this is really a first pass at this. So a lot of this, I think tonight that might come out of this is really talk about more process kind of things, more high level kinds of things, and ultimately, if we leave the room tonight with some thoughts about how these discussions might continue, that might be subcommittees that get created in order to keep discussions going, what future meetings might be like, then I think we've gotten someplace. So I understand your concern about having lots of people talking. I guess we'll have to see whether that turns out to be an issue or not.
Well, because you know I always have thoughts.
Well, you know, that probably is a great place to start.
All right, so fine. Then I will take the bull by the horns, as it were. Austin?
Hang on 1 second, we good.
I just have if it's okay.
Sure.
I'd like some clarification on what you, unless that's what you're gonna ask, I'd like some clarification on what you showed, okay? So, because I think it's, if people better understand. So if you back up to your revenues and these things here, a question that I would have is when you mention municipal cost, does that include health for the entire town, health insurance?
That's in fixed costs.
That's in fixed costs. So can you go back to the slide, please?
Which one?
The ones that showed where.
The red?
The growth for each.
The bar graph?
Well, that's good, right there, in the fixed cost, okay. So in the projections that you made in the last slide, where you showed either $1 million shortfall or excuse me, 900,000 or $1 million, did you just use the percentages of historic growth? You didn't look in there, like, you know, going to the building department and saying, do we have another Market 32 coming to town next year?
No.
So,
No, and so
this is just
I can answer to that.
This is just based on statistics from the past.
Yeah.
So when I look at this, I just want to understand what I'm looking at.
Yeah, so I can answer to that, and I'll tell you why, because I've been burned before. In estimating growth from projects that we believe are slated, and, you know, for all intents and purposes, we've been told by developers, we've been told by whoever it is that a project's gonna happen, and I put it into a new growth number and it didn't happen. And discussions with the finance team, they also, I think, adhere to that conservative, especially on the new growth perspective, that conservative mentality of when it's a sure thing, we'll put it in there. There's probably several projects that we can talk about tonight, but we won't, that we probably estimated would have happened already, and they didn't. There's some projects that, you know, I think we're waiting on. For example, the Blackstone Logistics project, I think we own about a third of that new growth. But for all intents and purposes, talking with the building department, they're not close yet to issuing an occupancy permit, right?
So all of the numbers that we're looking at essentially are based on no changes other than what we had to deal with last year.
Slightly upticked our new growth figure. We've been budgeting, I think most recently, it was brought up to 200,000. I boosted it up to 250. Again, because our average over the past 20 years has been just over 450. Actually, it's been like 480 something. But again, I didn't feel comfortable adding another 200 some odd thousand dollars to our new growth when we're not really sure when and if that's going to happen.
My question was only, I think people need to understand what you've shown before we start trying to guess as to what we should do in the future.
Yep.
That's the only thing I was going to add to what you said, Dave.
Okay.
Thank
Could
you.
I just ask about the transfers out? If you go back to that slide, sorry, Jesse, no, one more, where you had all the numbers with the $900,000 loss. So the transfers out, previously you were showing $100,000 for OPEB plus the other funding. So does that, the transfers out, is that to the sewer and the other fund as well, plus the free cash extra money that we put into OPEB, plus the money that we gave to the school for the SPED?
Yeah, so those line items kind of all lump in under what's an overarching transfers out category. You know, for example, the OPEB, that's an interesting one because that's heavily reliant on what our free cash figure is. So, you know, I think it would be a little premature to estimate for growth in free cash. So that's why on those respective line items, I've kept those to a minimal. But on the transfers out to our enterprise fund and some of the other funds, they've been either consistent, I kept them flat, or modestly increased them just based again off of average.
Sorry, one more question. How many years have we been level funding our budget? So I think we haven't added new people, you know, I think that's been the thing that Jim has said several years in a row, that we've been kind of level funding. So if we have an opportunity to look at this fresh, for example, I think in HR, she didn't have an admin person. I think we were going to add that position if it was available in the next budget. And I know the school's been talking about, you know, maybe some needs. if we were to be starting fresh with a new town manager, what would this look like if, regardless of revenue, if we looked at it from the expenses? So this is just, again, level funding for another year. It's not saying, you know, do we need another police officer? Do we need another
Yeah.
fire guy? Do we need, you
Right.
know, this is just same old, just rolling it forward with a percentage
Yep.
increase.
Yep, based off averages, and again, I think that's because we have not, first of all, I don't have select board goals to adhere to yet, right? I don't know if school committee set theirs for the budget process yet in terms of what the policy priorities are, but again, I'm not gonna talk about adding police officers, or we have not gone through, for example, the fire department feasibility study. So again, premature to put that in the model when we don't have a policy decision amongst the boards tonight. So those, again, we're starting the budget process in a few months, so that's where we'll be able to refine this model to reflect that. This is strictly based off of historic data. That's it.
So I want to give Jesse an opportunity to talk, but basically what you're giving us here is just a forecast that sets kind of like the sort of the parameters of what the 3-year outlook kind of
Yep.
looks like now, just as we, you know, as we sit here without really contemplating any significant changes in operations, so.
So just maintaining everything that we have in place.
So anyway, with that,
All right,
good.
Yep, thank you. So obviously, one of the big things that we as separate boards need to remember is we have capacity. We have limited capacity. We have limited revenue streams coming in. There are very few projects that are actually breaking ground. Not potentially, as Austin alluded to, but actually breaking ground. So it is very unlikely that any of our revenue streams are going to spike dramatically. Also, state funding. We've been around, some of us have been around for a while. We know the constant trend with state funding. I think, if memory serves me correctly, on the last long budget presentation that Tim and Jim gave us, I don't think we still met state funding from 20 years ago. So ultimately, one thing we need to remember if we begin contemplating new positions is capacity. Do we actually have the revenue to sustain what we have? Second, on some of those projections, like right up there, municipal expenses are a little higher than on the school side. One thing we also have to remember is that going back many, many years, the town has absorbed a significant percentage of the actual school budget through, in particular, the capital stabilization fund. So we have assisted the schools in basically maintaining their staffing, their funding priorities. So the consequence, of course, is if you go around town and look at the condition of the roads. You know, we got potholes everywhere. We got trees that need to be cut down because, again, we've done the best we could to maintain what we have. But the problem is I don't know about sustainability. In terms of being reactionary and taking funds from some of our, or monies, you know, a particular year from some of our stabilization funds, of course, we've reacted in the past. You know, and again, I think we saw that on the heartbeat monitor that Austin showed us. You know, we were going this way and that way because we were reacting rather than predicting. So as we go forward and we start planning our budget, keep that in mind. We as board members are making choices that are going to set the reality of things. So if, for instance, we spend a little too much in salary, or we try buying a little too much capital, you know, that's going to have an impact on the overall town budget. One of the big themes that has been put in place, that was one of the primary goals of Jim and Tim, was making sure that we do not put one-time monies into the budget to cover reoccurring costs. So that has been, I think, one of the successes that we've done on the town side, using any type of free cash to buy those capital projects, to try to buy them outright, rather than going to town meeting and, you know, requesting debt exclusions. So, again, I'm not saying that it's not time for change. I'm not saying that it's not time for maybe some new strategies. But we all have to be grounded, particularly some of the new people. You know, we have been on a path for a reason. So I don't think we necessarily should take it upon ourselves to right out of the gates try reinventing the wheel. let's see if we can kind of tweak things to satisfy our needs, but also keep in mind, we're all on the same page, we're all on the same team. Those are my comments. I do have 2 questions for Austin, one of which, if we do actually increase the new growth numbers in our budget, is that something, if we increase it, can we reverse it? Or are we locked in with the state going forward? Because there was a couple of conversations that we had over the years, and I can't remember which funds it was over the years, where we talked about doing something like that. And I remember the answer was always, well, if we go too high, it might have done with snow and ice, I don't remember. But if we go too high, we would not be able to reverse it.
Yes, so new growth is a figure that's certified by the Board of Assessors for the purposes of the tax recap process. So going through the tax classification hearing, that's something that we can't remember the word you used. Fudge? Did you use
Sure,
that
why
one?
not fudge?
Let's use fudge. You can't fudge new growth, right? So we have to certify growth. It's the LA 13. LA 13A was the kind of division of personal property, residential, commercial, and that, based off of your prior year tax rate, is what gets you your actual new growth number. You can't fudge that. That is what we're certifying to the Commonwealth and Department of Revenue for what our new growth is. Now, for budgeting purposes, that's where we have a little bit more flexibility to predict where we think new growth is. But as you know, right, the year that we had, well, actually last year we budgeted $200,000 for FY25. It actually ended up being $496. It'll probably be right around the same figure for FY26 as well, going through the recap. So that's going to help us. That's going to change these models a little bit, but it's not certified yet. That's certified by you guys and certified by the Department of Revenue. So no, those are figures that go through a whole process at the select board level.
If you don't mind, could you tell us what happens if you budget 250 and you actually have 500,000? What is the result of that?
So Sutton historically has realized that in the fall. So there's been many years, if you look at the warrant, we, for example, capital allocations, capital projects, we are funding that through raise and appropriate, so through taxation, essentially, right? So there's been several instances where our initial plan, we're going to pay for, I don't know, a front end loader through free cash, but because we've realized that in new growth, we've shifted that, or we've reduced our local receipts. So we capture it usually through the recap, and that's how you end up getting your tax rate and your property tax bills. And thank you all for your continued contributions there. So yeah, so that's all covered through our 2 town meetings and how we fund things. Does that answer your question?
But in short, it falls out as free cash, and then you can deal with free cash in your...
Yes, yeah. So if we, for example, in setting the budget in the spring, if we had increased our local receipts to balance the budget, but at the end, at the fall, we're increasing new growth, but we have high confidence that our local receipts are going to be higher, and the money will come in, that's going to generate free cash on the back end. And that's, I think, historically what Sutton has been able to do as well, is realize, especially on this slide, our history of local receipts. Most recently, we've been able to generate a substantial amount because the most recent select board meeting talking about year end, I think Tim Harrison mentioned motor vehicle excise. That's kind of this little fund that he reduces because when he knows the money's going to come in, but for the tax recap purposes, we need balance, right? So increasing new growth, long story short, increasing new growth during the tax recap process and decreasing on the local receipt side. As long as our expenses aren't going up, it's going to generate free cash for us at the end of the year.
If I may, just a comment for the group, right? That I think Jesse mentioned, limited revenues, but the idea of revenue sharing. So each year, usually through the state, there's an increase of money that comes to the town, and this group of people might be interested in discussing some kind of policy around how that's going to be shared. So that could be a topic that comes up and gets dealt with over time. So that, perhaps, thinking of the school, understanding what kind of resources might be available to use every year because of this policy might just be helpful. I think because we have so many new members around, that some future meeting, a discussion about free cash, so kind of what free cash is, how it's generated, you know, philosophy around what you might do with free cash might be useful for this group of folks.
A basic thing could be the recap sheet too, and just explain where the revenues come from.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So just to use this as a bit of an education process, because that makes sense to you. And the other one that came to my mind was maybe a discussion about the capital stabilization fund.
What is that?
Yeah, what is it, how is it funded? You know, that's been an item that's been of great benefit to the town over the years with the Shaw Farm property and, what do we call it? The lockbox,
Oh.
yeah.
Well, that 2008 override was split 450 to the capital stabilization and 500 to municipal and town schools.
We just have that cool name for it, what is it?
Capital stabilization?
No.
He'll come back
We
to
have
us
a
later.
nickname for it, yeah.
He'll come back to us.
Through the chair, if I may.
Please.
I think it's helpful. if
Brian,
we
can you
use
just give
members-
us your name for Deb?
Oh, sure. Brian Jermos from the Finance Committee. I think it's also helpful if we just understand through the, you know, how the stabilization, you know, the targets of stabilization from a bond rating issue, how that impacts our borrowing and our rating and our expense to borrow. I think that'd be good to know, because if people don't know that, they're more willing to dip into that, but they don't understand rating agencies want to see a set number. So just, you know, put that in the mix as well.
Yeah, I think all of those kind of things would be helpful for the whole group to kind of understand why the sauce gets made the way that it does, so. Okay, that's what I've got. Who would like to?
I just got a quick question. Are we able to have a copy of that for our own?
Yeah, yeah, so
great.
we'll post this, we're gonna make it just an overall separate FY '27 budget page on the website, and this is kind of the beginning of meeting materials that we'll share with the group as well.
One more question. The slide with the crazy hot graph in a sense. I don't know if that's just unique to Sutton. It could be other communities as well.
Certainly it is,
I
yeah.
don't think it's just.
Well, and that's why I wanted to address it, right? That's why I think some expenditure side limitations allows us to, sorry, I went the wrong way here. To create some more stability there. So if we, you know, can collectively develop a mutual understanding and a framework, you know, it doesn't have to be what I've recommended. I'm sure there's a compromise and there's a figure there, but that allows us, when we're projecting, to have a little bit more stability. Because there's a lot of towns that are using up all the available revenue that they have, not properly funding a lot of their obligations. I think Sutton's been fortunate to be able to still have a really solid capital funding campaign, really not a substantial impact on services. But then also fund things like OPEB and plan for health insurance, because you've been able to do that through, again, some smart conservative budgeting. But when putting together a plan for the future, this is really challenging. And this is not a good environment.
I'm looking at the education, right, and I'm thinking, we get the annual report where we spend like 120% over state minimum. So I'm just wondering how that down curve, right, because we still have 2.5% a year increase in average. And then we consistently fund, that started with Jen, about 120% over net. So I'm just wondering on that expense, like going down a bit. I'll take it offline.
Sure.
Yeah, it's good, really curious.
Through the chair, I have a question.
Please, if you could just
Yep,
give us your name.
Chris Matera. So 2 questions. One, on your EEG chart, is ARPA included in there, and is that why it's sort of somewhat skewed?
So those end up being a transfers in, if we're using it for budget purposes, which I don't know if Sutton did that. That would be generally a transfers in on local receipts. We used ARPA for, you know, capital projects and other initiatives, but, you know, there's many towns that used it as a revenue source for their general.
And then on your projections, are 9C, or, you know, our grant programs in there, and then are you?
No, this is just general fund.
Just general fund. Okay,
So no revolving
So
funds.
if a 9C cut happens, what does that do to our projections?
Throws it off. Yep. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Would you explain
Which
what
that's also
what
difficult.
you just asked?
So-
What's
so-
a 9C?
Yeah, so, you know, we get certain grants from the state for roads or, you know, whatever. And I believe the governor reserves the right to make 9C cuts.
Yeah.
And I think happens, I want to say in
Yeah,
December.
so the last time it happened, and some of this you can see, you know, some of the environments here were reflective of some of our fluctuating state aid. School folks, I don't know, how long have we been a minimum aid community? Do you know the answer to that? No? Okay.
Was that?
Minimum aid?
For
For chapter 70?
Yeah. I think that it's 2002.
Yeah, so it goes beyond, so we probably would have seen a substantial drop here. DOR doesn't have that data here. And certainly Munis didn't have it from what I could see. So, but 9C cuts certainly, so this year, for example, is a good example. So earmarks. If the school, if you received any town, the DUD received one, they've been paused until January. Because the governor and the administration are waiting on the revenue and the fiscal outlook on the state side. They claim to not touch other parts of state aid, like our unrestricted general government or Chapter 70, but who knows? We'll see when we get there. But we would certainly see that here. What's challenging is as all of us know, the state legislature does a great job getting the budget passed on time. There you go. We pass our budget. We're responsible. We pass our budget before they do. So we're making assumptions. A lot of us, we probably based off of House 1, the governor's budget, or initial projections.
Prior year.
Prior year. That's even better. I love that. My previous community did not. So you're able to kind of have a little bit more stability on the revenue side. And then we fix that again. Fall is our fix-it kind of town meeting. So that's what we're going to do in October, right? Our state aid, thankfully, this year for Chapter 70 is increasing just under $50,000. So we're fortunate to be able to raise that and offset that on either local receipts or other revenue categories. But certainly hard to predict, and that's why I tried to just overall be conservative on 1% growth rate for state aid, because it's been
Right,
all
so,
over.
so if 500K was cut, we would have to take that from free cash, I would assume, to basically cover.
Free cash or raise it somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah. Or another,
Yeah,
just
sure.
overall other revenue source. Yeah.
You know, a moment ago, I was suggesting that maybe a future use of this meeting might be good for some of those topics. I would think the school might do well also to make some presentations to a meeting like this about some of your revenue sources and reserve funds and those kind of spending things. So again, the group can have an understanding of kind of, you know, thinking of it from the town side, where the spending goes and what those, what your requirements are, what your variables are. You know, it's good to know. I think it'd be helpful to know kind of what your challenges are around those kinds of issues, things you think you have coming in that don't always come in, and you know what you have to go through to put the budget together. So, and maybe if we have a little pause here, it might be a good time. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if anybody from the school side would like to give some high-level thoughts about what issues you have in front of you and what concerns you might have.
One thing that I just wanted to point out, looking at this very high level.
Harrison, can you just identify yourself?
Yep, Harrison McKinley, business manager of the school district. So really quick, without me going into these two data sources, right? It's more obvious to me that these trends follow union contract negotiations. You'll see the peaks and valleys span 3-year swaths where over those 3 years, as that negotiate percentile is already known, the expense is known, therefore that line is decreasing, and then you negotiate, and then it skyrockets back up the following year, right? So you'll see, you know, we just had the police contract negotiated, town expense jumps, right? School, STA teacher, third final year, right? So we're at that very bottom trend. So if I were to look at my magic ball, I would predict that the school's green line is going to skyrocket next year with the STA negotiated contracts. So, you know, when you look at that, one thing that makes up the majority of the town's expenses, almost 80%, is union negotiated contracts for salaries, and those follow the direct trends, right? So that's something that I think is important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I had a note about that, Harrison, myself, on contracts. And so, you know, listening to Austin, I can hear a vision that he has. And so I think it's going to behoove all of you to understand where he's going with that and understand how questions like that impact kind of the model and why we're together to work through those things. So I think that's a great point.
To the moderator, if I may, please.
Jim,
Yeah, awesome. Jim and Amarna, Select Board. Can we go to the page with the red for a second? Red, your scary.
The worst red or the better red?
Toggle.
Matt,
We'll go with the better one.
yeah. So, Austin, just going from fiscal year 2025 to 2026, what's driving the 365-ish thousand decrease in expenses?
Probably transfers out, Jim. I don't know, I'd have to, yeah, it is, yeah. From 25 to 26, you see we had transfers out of, and this is actual data, right?
Yeah.
So transfers out, and I don't know, Harrison, you can probably speak to this a little bit more, well, we had a healthy free cash number.
Are you
We had
not
over $4
projecting,
million.
are you not projecting that you'll have additional money that's a percentage of free cash?
No,
Is that
because
right?
that's not what.
You know, when you look at those numbers, right, it's very easy to look at the year-over-year decrease, right? You're trying to look for a number that decreases to justify why the expense decreases, but what I think is more important to point out and analyze is the smaller increase, right? So generally, you know, the town expenses or the school expenses, you might have had a $600,000-700,000 jump, where you're looking at that one. The schools is about $1 million, so pay a lot of attention to the increases more so than the decreases, right? Because those tend to fluctuate more so than the decreases. Generally, you don't see departments with large decreases of in excess of $1 million, right? You're gonna see departments with increases most of the time, but how large are those increases? And that's what, you know, a small tweak to an expense is gonna drive it, but if all the other departments have more minor increases, that's what will generate that overall decrease.
Yeah, and when you're talking percentage-wise, a little bit of, transfers out is a difficult one because it's heavily reliant on, again, there's policies that reflect our free cash levels. So when we have great years of healthy free cash, we're putting a lot of money into OPEB and to some of our other funds. Whereas, you know, hopefully for some of our operating expenses, we have a little bit more stability, but those are already such large figures where I think a little bit to what Harrison was speaking to as well, the percent change is a little bit smaller, but on average, as we're looking through the history, this is where we are. FY25 is unaudited actuals. FY26 is what was approved in May.
Okay. I'm just looking at the line, I'm trying to understand why it drops down 365 and then expenses go up, you know, 1.5-ish. So I'm just trying to understand the drivers. I know we are looking at the increases based on percentages. Personally, I find it very helpful if we start to look at a scenario which is activity-based. Hey, we have X number of heads, here's the number of heads, here's the, as Harrison said, the projected, you know, increase in payments, et cetera, in terms of salary or union contracts. I'd like to just get a sense for what the drivers are. I think doing the percentages is fine, but are there actual things that are driving the ups and downs? I mean, both on the expense side, and I think on the revenue side, to also start to look into things like TIFs, other things like that as they layer out in the future.
Yeah, so and this is, I think where David was hopefully encouraging the group to kind of get together again. I hope the next time we talk, we're starting the budget process and we have a better idea of where we're going to be, right? So this is, you know, this is not Austin and the finance team going line by line. This is, again, just high-level trends and big picture where we are. But once we have preliminary requests from departments, I think that will also be helpful to inform the group about, you know, where we are. You know, once we have, you know, better idea of what our projections are, for example, for collective bargaining, we can adjust this model. This is certainly hopefully a model that is flexible based off of how the budget process is going and some of the policy decisions that you folks make as well.
Through the moderator.
Please.
It's Erin Reed Erickson, school committee. Maybe picking up a little bit from what Jim just asked and as we move forward. First, an overall comment, which is if revenue is only bumping, I mean, I'm looking at 2025 and 2027. I'm just using those two. It doesn't bump up a lot in terms of the revenue coming in. And 2 years from now, money in is going to actually mean less of an impact, right? We know, because cost of living. So whatever revenue is coming in, it's going to get spread thinner. Then I look at expenses. I also am looking at 2025 and 2027. And expenses, it's like, okay, we've tried to keep level. But we also have to recognize that keeping level in dollar figures isn't going to translate to head count. And so maybe from what Jim was saying, I think when I look at the red numbers, and we know that we're on the less scary slide, could you provide just some context of what this could mean when we have a 900,000 shortfall, a 1.4, and we know that it's going to hit both the town and the schools. So what does that translate to in terms of a head count? And so
those are policy decisions, right? And that's not for me to decide, right? And I think that there would have to be some sort of directive or policy decision from the both of you. For example, if we need to reduce services based off of that $900,000 figure, we need to know that from you folks so we can modify our figures to give you those responses, right? So I can't give you at the top of my head right now what that means for the impact on town services. I don't know if Caitlin Harrison could do the same thing tonight, but certainly as we go through those discussions, and if there's a directive from you folks that you need to reduce, that's where we can really give you better figures about what the service levels look like based upon those figures. But I can say, just speaking on the town side, just over 2 months in here, and I'm very shocked how lean the town is operating. Obviously, I don't know the schools well enough, but maybe you'd say the same.
So, I guess that was my point.
Just, can I finish? Right, so this is where I think I really hope that you folks can steer your discussions over the future meetings. We're starting the budget process, and the two administrations need to know, what do you think? What are your policy priorities? So we can put together figures that align with, again, our available resources, and then put together a plan that's responsive to your goals and provides still the quality services that you all expect.
Can I make a comment to the chair?
Please.
Jonathan Anderson, Select Board. I think one of the things we should do as part of one of our working sessions here is to go over the policies so that everybody understands the policies that are in place right now, so the decisions are made, especially when the transfers out, of what's going out based on policy. It's being driven by policy.
Yeah.
So I think we all need to understand what those policies are, both on the town side and on the school side, because they do dictate where money's going and how much of it's going. So I definitely think that's what we should cover.
Through the moderator?
Please.
I guess that's why I mentioned something about the expenses. So right now, the school department and the municipal center share a custodian. So the town hall doesn't get cleaned every day, and the librarians clean their own toilet. So I guess if we have an opportunity to look, this is level funded again. And Austin, over 2 months, already sees that we're very lean. So from the perspective of a policymaker and a board member, just for curiosity, I would wonder, what is our actual number if we said to the departments, don't go nuts, not your wish list, but you guys know you're lean at the school, we know they're lean at the municipal center. What would it look like if we started like at the zero base and said activity based, and what do you need? What do you need? What's your wish list? And then that number is, wow, we're short $3 million. Okay, we need to know that because we're not trimming our trees, we're not fixing our roads, we're sharing janitors, we are. And in one year, and I don't know if it was 2010 or whatever, department heads forewent raises. So we've had a lot of cooperation from our municipal and our teachers, but what if we just said, don't give us a level funded, but don't go crazy, but what do you need? What do you need to do a little better job and get better outcomes? Excuse me, and then we could look at what's the gap? Because to go and ask for an override to people who are having higher costs in their own homes, shrinkflation, in the past practice of, we've had some industries come in who have gotten tax breaks, which are still there, so that rolls on to new growth. Each year, as they work through the TIF, a little bit more of that value comes on. So, that's in the new growth number, but where do we stand? Because the school's been saying we might need an override, but we better know, what do we really need? Because we've tried 3 times, we've passed 2. I think the first one was around, 1987 or so, and the second one was 2008 with the capital stabilization. That failed. That February override that year failed. They were trying to get an override for Shaw Farm. And what worked was, at that time, the school building committee was working too, and there was discussion, how are our buildings so poorly maintained? How are we running into these big capital expenditures? Why aren't we doing regular maintenance? And I remember being on that committee, and I thought it was Ken Stewart who threw out, hey, this other town has capital stabilization. And then the town worked to say, all right, we're going to take $450 and create this capital stabilization fund. We're going to use it to pay off the debt for Shaw Farm. And as that Shaw Farm debt comes off, we'll have more money in the capital stabilization, so we don't have to just be asking for 5 trucks. And then to appease everyone else that didn't want Shaw Farm, we're going to give $500,000. That's going to be split $250 to the school and $250 to the town. Now, what happens every year with that capital stabilization amount, the original $450, it grows 2.5% every year because in our levy, it's a raise and appropriate. So I think this past year, that $450,000 override is adding over $700,000 to our capital stabilization. So this was a great thing for the community to do. But I watched school committee the other day. You're talking about maintenance on a water tower. You've got issues with the cement blocks on the solar panels. You guys didn't know where the trench was. So we don't have policies in place for succession when our janitor leaves. And right now we're at a point in time where our employees are not staying for 25 years. I looked at the new Beacon News that came out today. There's a lot of town manager positions. One of the gentlemen who interviewed for us took a job in Bellingham. And they're jumping every 3 to 4 years. So from a policy perspective, if we don't know that someone does pointing on the Manchog Dam every year to make sure it doesn't get compromised, that work's not getting done. The drains weren't being cleaned on the roof. How did that happen? Where's that policy? So we're running into big costs now, capital costs, that 2008 we were hoping we weren't going to run into. So I guess this level funding, all right, these are numbers, we're going up 2.5%, but where do we need to be a better town for our citizens before we knock on their doors and ask them to pay more money? That would just be my thought.
So, taking that up a level, one thing, watching this slide and listening to, I thought your comments were really spot on. We always have a budget process that's going on. Austin said earlier, the budget period comes and goes very quickly every year. But you also, if this is going to work well, this group, it's got to be looking at long-term issues, and whether you're talking about an override or just the idea of talking to the citizens of town about the services that we provide, understanding how we do, how well are we doing, what are the needs, do we think we're meeting those things, with a process for communicating to the town and communicating amongst ourselves about what we think is appropriate levels of service. Those are important things to do long-term, to know where you think you need to be. I would say if anyone's going to have a discussion about an override, you might as well forget about it if you don't do a good job of communicating with the town over what your needs are and why you might need some money. So developing a plan for that, I think, is essential. And this hopefully can be part of how that comes about. Anybody else got,
Through the moderator,
please?
I think one thing that I'd like to bring the conversation back to is that, outside of the employees in the room tonight, right? Each board member has a fiduciary responsibility to direct the staff at the school and the town hall for the appropriate boards, how they envision and what they would like to be involved with during this budget creation process. And, this is going into my 4th year, right? And I observed both town and school budget building processes, and that's really what my goal here tonight is to focus in on how we start this process. I would like to see more involvement from the boards directing the administration of this town, how they would like to see the budgets unfold, right? I can speak to the school side. I find that oftentimes when I'm helping present the budget in February and January, we far too often hear, how did we get this budget here today? Where did the time go? I believe this is an opportunity. We're starting well in advance for each of you to have the conversations with your respective administration. I know the town accountant is coming on in the few weeks, but view it as an opportunity, right? This is the timeline that it's pretty much in line with what the town has been accustomed to. We do find ourselves with a lot of challenges, but I think the level of engagement from the different stakeholders in this room tonight definitely needs to be at a more involved level than what we here in Sutton have been used to. It's not just about watching a presentation at your monthly meeting. It's about engaging, looking at data, and basing that on real world events. So keep that in mind. I'm trying to keep us at this high level, process overview, not getting into numbers as much, because we're not there yet, right? There's still a lot of work left to be done to pull that data, to present to the boards. Right now, you should be thinking about how you want to involve yourself and where does your involvement fit into this timeline.
If I may, the only challenge to that, and I would just put a word of caution out there, is that the charter creates these boards and only gives us authority when we act as boards. So we do not, as individuals, have authority to interfere with the day-to-day operation of either the school or the town side. So I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, Harrison, but we really have to make sure that we proceed as groups, not as individuals. But I think if we do it as groups, if we take the time to actually understand, I think we will represent to the folks much better than if we try doing it as, one person at a time.
Through the chair, Pat Morris from the Finance Committee. So Harrison, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm trying to envision, and I don't want to take Jess's word here, but how that would work. My understanding, and please clarify this, is that the school board sets the budget for the school up to the minimum contribution. Is that correct?
Not every year, I would say. When we roll forward the budget, right, I think it's important to know that we don't always set it to the minimum, right? It's driven by a lot of outside factors and what time of year we're at, really.
Okay, so let me rephrase it then. At a high level, you have a minimum contribution and you're somewhere around there,
Yep.
depending on what time of the year it is, okay? If you're short, you come to the town manager and you say, we're short, and then you have a conversation. Now, maybe you save some money by having the IT person work both the town hall and the municipal and the school, and the municipal pays for it. So you save some money there. The janitor, whether the janitor's working or not, in both places, you share that. And then when it still doesn't work, you come and say, help me. Like last year, it was $450,000. So I'm trying to set a base here. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's
From a high level, that's correct, okay? So if someone from the finance committee wanted to come and sit in on every one of your meetings, what would you have them do?
Well, I think bringing back the conversations to the finance committee themselves would be very important. Understanding the processes that are involved with how we create the budget. One thing that I've noticed that a lot of individuals in town don't quite understand is the allocation process. So when you look at the overall school budget and you see that 4.18% year-over-year increase, you might take that for granted and say the school has a 4.18% increase. But I can tell you from a mathematical standpoint that is not accurate, right? We put grants, we put revolving accounts in to decrease it to that number to balance the budget after we've gone to the town to request additional funds. That's very important for all boards to understand because the school does a lot of work in meeting some of these thresholds, right? And it is sort of like an orchestra, so to speak, where you're putting allocations in to bring us down to that level. So I would think that's one thing I could point to as an example of if you sat in at a school committee budget presentation and you went back to FinCom and had a discussion and said, you know, right now the school's budget increase is 4.18%, but the true increase is 6.5%, and then understand why the school has it at that 4.18% versus the 6.5%, right? Those are conversations that I think far too often we don't have. We aren't having the conversation of what true financial impact is because we're so focused on meeting the goal of closing the gap that we're not looking at the methods we use to get to a closed gap, right? We're not looking at positions that were lost through attrition that were just not re-included into the school budget. Someone retired, they left. But then from a budget standpoint, you're looking at it 4.18%. Okay, they have everything they need. We just didn't replace some of those. So those are, I could go on forever, but those are things that I would say are important to understand.
Thank you. I mean, again, and again to the chair here, and I don't look for, I want you to volunteer for this, okay? We're talking about, I've known you for too long, he's known me for too long. We're talking about the school, and we're talking about the town itself, but two other big expenses are BVT and Norfolk Aggie. Norfolk Aggie, we only spend 2 or 3 people there, so I don't know what we're going to do with that unless we get a horse farm here and do something. But BVT is big, and I don't have an answer for you, but I don't think we have enough oversight, can I say, for the amount of money that we spend.
So if I can on that point, when we had our leadership team meeting, and Pat did bring up the notion of BVT, I think I'm going to ask that our board, the select board, through Austin, invite our elected representative. Because we actually have a school committee member that sits on the BVT school committee. And have them come before us maybe twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, and give us updates. So that way, we are not reacting when Mr. Steele, is he a doctor? The new superintendent.
No, he's not.
All right, Mr. Steele, when he sends the budget our way, usually after we're already in the process of kind of formalizing the town budget. So again, so we're not reacting. So hopefully that will increase our ability to have conversations with real substantive data.
No, please, no. Much rather hear from you.
Well, I was just saying, I mean, first of all, I appreciate that we're kind of like digging into, some of the, and we have a lot more to dig into. Harrison raised, one, I think BVT, absolutely. I would love for you to do that in maybe a tri-board, just because it does have such a large impact.
If you think that would be valuable, I'm sure Austin would have no problem inviting him to our next meeting.
It's something that has affected the school committee for so many years. And looking at the numbers that were provided to us recently, you can see how BVT fluctuates at times, but when it hits its height, it hurts the most. Another one that is, I just look at the big budget items that affect is, the water, the fact that, what did we learn? Only 5 school districts in the entire state run and have their own wastewater, and the high costs of repairs that keep hitting a budget that, you know, we think we're doing okay, and then you get a bill that is larger than anticipated. And to me, that's also a town planning issue. Not that I think it needs to change, but we need to recognize that it is a big ticket cost that comes at the expense of students. When we have to put money in our budget to go repair a piece of, and I know also the systems on top of the new school building, the HVAC, you know, the RTUs, thank you, engineer here. You know, those are big ticket items that don't easily get absorbed when we have such a small, like, discretionary piece when you know, do your salaries. And I just also, you know, want to shout out when we were saying, like, on the backs of, and we're asking a lot from a lot of different factions, you know, to help us close that gap that Harrison mentioned in this past year. The teacher's contract said they gave back money, $50,000 back, that was already, you know, sent to them through a PIP or a performance, you know, incentive program. And they gave that back in order for us to help close that gap so that we were coming to the town, staying within our means. So that I think is another item or area to dig into because it has such a large impact on the school budget.
Through the moderator, I think, you know, we're making attempts with the enrollment, you know, looking at our enrollment to kind of live with, sorry, Kristen Terra, school committee.
Yeah, just express more so Ted can hear.
We are, we're making steps to kind of live within our means, looking at enrollment and kind of planning things based on that. I think that's a new, kind of a new working group that we're thinking of as a school committee.
I don't think there's anybody here that would argue with that concept. I would further argue all these kind of discussions that happen with BVT as, you know, I think my issue with BVT over the years has just been the variations in expenditures, and it's so hard to plan for, and really, I always feel like that you get a big number in, and that's just taking away from what we can do with the school on the other side, you know, and if you're talking about capital costs that are taken away from education, those are the kinds of things, it seems to me, that this group of people would like to talk about, so that, you know, if there's a more creative solution to those things, that would help. And living within your means, to me, you know, again, nobody would argue with doing that, but I think to Christine's point earlier, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? And what services are you trying to provide to the town? I think this is the kind of group that should help you, you know, understand maybe what makes sense to everybody. I guess my point is, maybe don't be too insular. Bring it out and talk about it. So, and I wanted to speak to something quickly that Harrison brought up. This calendar that exists here is a pretty hard calendar. You know, there's not a lot of room to move within that. Ultimately, when the fiscal year ends, we can't operate without a balanced budget that's been voted on by the town for the next year. That's a state mandate. We have to have a balanced budget. There are also mandated periods of time where dates have to be met. You can sort of walk back from the Springtown meeting, and those dates that are there are things that have to get done, or else we're out of compliance, right? So we have to have time for public hearings to happen and all those kind of things. So my point to Harrison is, it's great to have as much participation in everybody's area, but at the same time, you know, there's a lot of, we kind of have to do what we've done in the past because that's the only way we can get it done in time. So when I think about long-term planning, to me, that's where these groups have to look at the kinds of long-term improvements we'd like to make to process that you need to think about for next year and the year after, because you're probably not going to get as much of it as you'd like to have done this year done. Kind of have to work through the kind of channels that, you know, you got to balance what you can get done with what needs to get done. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator. Norman Champagne, Select Board.
That's right, I'm not the chair.
I will have it. You know, we looked with a set of lens for both expenses and revenue, and I think you said the key word is probably a workshop or a separate work group. you gotta have some sort of divergent thinking, meaning thinking outside of the box of new revenue streams, right? New economic development, right? So maybe ideal as we're doing this is having a small work group, just an idea. I have some ideas, and maybe other people have ideas, to develop a simple work group, just saying, how can you incur more revenue? What can you do in town? Or what parcels? What can you do working with Jen for more economic development? So we could have more revenue coming in to drive more revenue for both municipal needs as well as education needs. So again, we have a set of blinders sometimes, but we could have a little divergent thinking work group for new revenue streams. So I can't think of, it's tough because people are limited with budget at home. You have increased in education support, obviously, as well as municipal services such as police, fire, and highway. So it's a delicate balance. And looking at revenue sources or new revenue sources is tough to be creative, but doesn't hurt to have such a group.
Well, based on those red numbers, I think that's necessary.
What's that, please?
Based on those red numbers, I think that is
And
necessary.
I think it is, right? And I think we willing to have, I think we spend so much time, right? How can we, it's kind of like shoehorning a shoe, and it's like, it's every year, it's like squeak, and you just said it, it's like, how do we get by? And it's like a matter of new revenue streams, and what have you thought about?
Chair?
Please.
We also have to be careful too that the idea of going out and, let's say, bringing more companies in does not necessarily translate into more revenue for the town. So it can and it can't. It's not a panacea of like we go do this and we're going to get automatic revenues. Like we've got to really look into this and understand how we're zoning things. Even like what we just went through with 100 Worcester Turnpike. We kind of had an idea this business would be a great business for us, but it wasn't zoned for sales. So we have a lot of companies kind of doing these internet sales and things like that, but fall under guidelines that are based on traditional dealerships, car dealerships. So we've got to look at our bylaws and start to shift them a little bit to meet the needs of the businesses today. I don't think we should be in the business of regulating businesses and how they make money. We need to be, building our revenues, so then we can get the revenues they're going to be bringing in. The other thing too, on the expense side, like let's go with BBT. I would like to really understand why kids are going to BBT. If they're going because they want to do a trade, I don't think Sutton can compete against that. But what I do want to understand is if they're going because they feel it's a better education, they're going for college prep. That to me is a problem, because now we're sending kids to go get college prep where they should really be doing that in Sutton. So I don't want to solve for necessarily the trade part of it. We need to be putting pressure on BBT to move more back towards the trades again, because they're so focused on college prep, and really making sure that our kids aren't going to BBT because they feel it's a better education for them to get to college. And so that's something that I would like to better understand, because I know that's one example, but I think we need to look at that in many different areas.
To the chair, Pat Morris again. I have some, not I, but the board that I serve on, we have some brand new members, and they tend to be quite quiet because they're so new here. So I don't want them to be quiet. So I'm going to specifically ask John. You've got a good background as a CFO of a large company. You have thoughts on what we've said tonight?
Well, when you look at it at this level, I need more detail. You know what I mean? I can't look at that and have any thought about it. I need to look at the numbers and understand where they're coming from. And once I have that, I think it'll be more useful for me.
Austin?
Yeah, so if you want detail, I would encourage you to stop by town hall and pick up the budget and pick up all of the prior year, because that's where this information's from, right? So we can certainly print out reports. I know.
It's all on the website.
It's all on the website.
Yeah,
well, some of it.
If you dig.
We're gonna work on that a little bit.
But is your PowerPoint broken out by salaries, for example?
No.
Yeah.
Nope. Because again, percentages. Wanted to keep it high level, especially for tonight. So those 4 categories, we could certainly go down a lot of rabbit holes with what has been the average growth rate for the salary of the highway department for the past 20 years. I think it's a good discussion to have, but I think for having a large group here, I think we need to stay focused, big picture where we are. So we can certainly provide detail for you, and happy to do that. And a lot of that, as was mentioned, is already available.
So, let me just interject here. When John joined the Finance Committee, the first thing he asked for was a copy of the last audit, okay? And he read it. I'm proud of him, and he summarized it for me. So if John were to send you an email with a little bit more specifics, could you direct him rather than ask him to read the whole thing? Is that fair enough, John?
Yeah, that's
Okay, would you do that for him?
Sure.
Thank you. So let me look over here. Here's my other.
Right here.
Yeah.
So Gary Primo, a little overwhelmed right now with what I'm hearing and trying to absorb a lot of it. I do have I come from the world of banking, so I do have some financial understanding. What I'm finding is I didn't realize how tight the town was in financing with its finances. So I think having groups like this with open discussions is extremely helpful for me to start to gather some knowledge and understanding. I think there's a lot of terminology that's thrown out there for a new person not understanding. I'm sitting here writing down like what's OPEB.
Other post-employment benefits.
Okay, you know that, okay? How does a new person know that? So I think we have to be a little careful about that when we're talking because we just assume that everybody knows that. So, I'm absorbing and I'll be asking questions.
In fairness, this is his very first meeting.
Thank you.
I don't know what OPEB is.
Jump in the deep end.
George, comments? George is not shy.
No, I mean, my comments are in line with, sorry, George Watson. My comments are in line with what I think Harrison mentioned earlier and others about services. I mean, as we talk about trying to meet the budget, one question that I often ask during our meetings is, well, what else do you need? What's missing? And how are the services that we're providing, how is that matching up to the surrounding towns? Because I mean, it's great if we miss the budget, but if our town's going downhill because we're making a budget, then it's really no benefit. It's of no benefit to anyone else. So, I mean, we're not going to go out. There's no way in hell, pardon my French, I'm going to sit at a school committee meeting on the budget. I mean, that's a lot.
I won't take offense.
Send me the cliff notes. I'll read them. And I'm not going to read the audit like John did, because but, I mean, I think in the presentation to the committee on finance issues, don't just present the budget. Present what you're missing because of the budget. This is what we could have done if we had more money. This is what other towns are doing that we're not, and this is why kids are going to BBT, et cetera. And I think the BBT discussions, my understanding, that's going to change a lot because now it's a lottery, and then there's also some movement in the state to change the funding of that too. They're going to adjust how that's funded. So we may end up being we may stop being the deep pocket with BBT that we're at least not in that position that we're currently in.
Those things never seem to work out in our benefit, though.
I know. It's hold your breath.
So, Peter or Brian, any comments?
Peter Zona, it's my third year with the group. I've enjoyed this because I spent some time as a treasurer at a vocational school. I work for the Division of Local Services, and as the treasurer, of course, I was never involved in the budget. I just had to make sure the money was there, and it was, we took care of that. But looking at this, and I wrote a little note to Gary during the meeting. These are the kinds of things I do at home with my own personal finances. Where the bills are, what the projections might be, where's it coming from, and so on and so forth. So I found this very interesting. But as John said, the detail, we don't have it, we're just looking at charts. I remember the first time we had one with the Finance Committee, there was a misprint. Somebody went up like 60%, but the number was put in the wrong place. And then once they straightened it out, but I'm saying, oh my God, this is my first time through. What is this? They caught it before I said anything. I wasn't sure I was going to embarrass myself or not, to be honest with you. But other than that, it's been an overview tonight. I think what people have said about getting together, working together, and so on and so forth. Should be interested. We'll see how it works out.
So, if I may, you,
I'm done.
Your members? It's, you something, Chris?
No, I'm good.
So it's 7:30. I don't want to stifle questions in conversation.
Can I just say one thing?
Please.
Caitlin Paget, Superintendent. So my sentiments echo pretty much what George said. One of the things that we've been looking at is enrollment. It's a big thing for us, and I can tell you that the numbers to BBT have actually been decreasing since 2021. But our choice to out kids are increasing pretty significantly, actually. And they're either being homeschooled or they're going to other public schools in the area over Sutton. So why is that? And to be quite frank, we're not competing. We're not even close to competing and offering what other schools are offering kids. So we have to find creative solutions to come up with the funds to compete if we want kids to stay here. Because 81% of our budget is fixed on salaries. And if we want kids to stay in Sutton, we're gonna have to find a way to make them want to be here, and that means providing the services that they need, which I don't think we are.
All right, if I may. Thank you for that, by the way. So it is 7:30. I think in preliminary discussions, about an hour and a half is what we're sort of thinking might work tonight. I really don't want to stop the good conversations we're having. I think in my mind, this has been a wide-ranging kind of meeting tonight. We've talked about, we sort of talked about short-term issues, we got into the weeds in some places, and we're up kind of high level on some other things. So, I'm going to just throw out a quick thing. Is everybody kind of thinking this is a good forum? We're happy to be doing this kind of thing.
Indeed.
So I was hoping I'd hear that. I think I felt that way tonight. I think we need to talk about what it is we want to do next, when we want to do that next, what's going to be helpful to kind of keep this process moving forward in a helpful way. I think there has been some discussions, and we're not going to get to this tonight, but some discussions about creating some subgroups to talk about things. An observation that I had was, each of the boards that are here have their own respective responsibilities to the town. So the school is going to create a school budget. At the end of the day, the town's going to create a town budget, which encompasses the school budget, right? This is not a forum where the select board is giving up authority to the school board or to the finance committee, and vice versa, right? Ultimately, the select board's not going to take power away from the schools. What we're doing here is trying to understand each other better, understand the concerns, understand the needs, understand the whatever kind of restrictions we're under, if the school is, frequently paying for, expenses to fix the sewer treatment plant at the school that feels like maybe it should be an expense item that the whole town might share in. That's the kind of thing that, if we have conversations, maybe we can figure that kind of thing out. So that's the big purpose. The big purpose is really to try to have everybody understand each other better so that the conversations flow better, and maybe the needs can be addressed in a more efficient manner, and that we can speak to the town in a way that feels more cohesive and forward-focused. So now I'm going to ask, what's next? What do we do next? I think we talked about quarterly meetings. So if we're ready, if that's a time frame that we can deal with, I don't know where that falls in your budget calendar, but, we should put some agenda items on to talk about what we should prepare for the next meeting of this body.
The moderators, so it was brought up tonight to ask the school committee to present some of our revenue sources, our funding grants, different variables and challenges that the school's facing so that the entire tri-board has a better understanding of some of these terminologies that we're referring to at the school. We'd be more than happy to have some type of presentation for the next meeting, even if it's a small portion of it. I think it could benefit us all going into the budget season.
And I think a big piece of that is we'd be more than happy to share the challenges that we've found over the last year.
Okay.
Mr. Moderator, I got a thought or suggestion. I think if we were doing this in a corporate setting, we would have different divisions, different cost centers all rolling with the numbers. So if I look to my right, Caitlin, like you've got your divisions underneath your departments, right? Elementary, etc. Austin, you've got fire, police, so on and so forth. I think it'd be really helpful if we had the department heads and people responsible looking out in that forecast period, 26, 27, 28, however far we're going out. What are the actual drivers? So to Aaron's point, to Christine's point, what are the things that are actually driving? So if those department heads took a look at their numbers, as Jesse said, we're not the ones that are making the operational decisions. I would really like to have the people that are making the operational decisions saying, hey, here's what it looks like, here's the nice to haves, here's the need to haves. To me, that's the best way that we can actually collectively engage on the expense items. To Norman's point, I think, I'm not sure who actually, if it's Nikki and Jen, the combination, who are looking at the revenue side, but who's framing up the revenue pieces. Obviously, there's grants, there's other things, but if we had the department heads who are responsible for this as their day jobs, putting that information together for one of our next meetings, it'd be good to actually be able to get into the details of that versus just saying, hey, it's 3.7% increase historically. And so that'd be my ask.
So I'm a little concerned just about the time, the little amount of time we have to spend at one of these meetings and whether or not we can get into that kind of detail or not. And that's kind of a question for all of you. How much of the budget challenges for town departments do we need to get into here, or is that something that members of this board can bring from those people to here? So that's an open question. I don't know.
So I attended Christine Watkins attended the new select board training, and there were actually towns, and I think Andover might have been one of the towns. They actually do a tri-board Saturday retreat on budget, where they're there for Saturday, and they're working through that to get a good understanding. Because unless individually you're going to dig into the information.
Yeah, that was actually listening to all of you, one of the thoughts that I had is you each have your own jobs within the town. And there's a lot of detail you have to dig in to do your jobs. And so this board is kind of asking you to also dig in on the other people's boards. It's a lot to ask, so understanding how you're going to.
I would say no, we're looking for that board to dig into theirs and then share it.
So I think to me that kind of makes some sense to do it from that perspective, kind of train each other.
Yeah, I mean, through the chair, our moderator, Chris Pateri, we have subcommittees for this, right? Or are we going to create subcommittees from this larger group? Is that the thought process? Working groups.
That's the thought, that there might be places where it would be helpful to put smaller teams of people together to dig into, whatever particular issue we're talking about. So I don't know unless somebody has a specific suggestion that we need to do that tonight.
Yeah, I don't think we necessarily need to do that.
Yeah, I don't think we're ready to do that myself.
We have to increase our understanding. We have to increase our knowledge. We have to increase our conversations. Once we're all on the same page, then we can break up into smaller units to possibly address some of the problems that are presented.
You already have your subgroups though, in each different, like you have the school committee, which is a
Yeah.
subgroup. I mean, I don't know if we have to create subgroups per se. I think it's really helpful to hear what are the actual details of what you get as a school. We don't know that until, well, actually we don't know that.
Well, I think last year, one of the things that the school department started was when we did our budget process, we scaffold it by, these are the requirements. We cannot get away with not adding these to the budget, no matter what the financial impact is. We have to legally do it. Then we had the needs. These are things that we really need, and we have data points to support why we need those things. And these are the wants. It would be great to have these, and they would be great things for our kids to have and for our staff to have. But at this point in time, if we can't get them, that's okay. But we want to make sure that the town and the community know that this is what we want for our kids. So that was really helpful for us last year.
So through the moderator, I believe, Jonathan, you're one who had asked at one point in a meeting, you guys do have a lot of mandates from the state, things that you have to do. And I think the question was, what are the unfunded mandates? What does that number look like to give us, to empower us to go to our legislators and say, you know, this is our school budget. This is what's told that we have to do it by the state. And this is what they're not funding it for us. So to give us some leg with the, you know, senators and reps, right? Is that what you had asked, Jonathan?
I've asked also.
He's asked to. I mean, through the moderator, I think the thing that's most important for me right now is going back to what you're saying, and also I think George and many others have said today, is I'd really like to understand, like, we're operating at bare bones, like, and we're not really giving good service, right, overall. I mean, we're doing the best we can with what we've got, with the money we have. But what I really want to understand is what we really, where we should be, and then understand what that gap is and why. Because that gets back to what you're saying here, is that, you know, we're losing kids and we're level funding every year.
Significant amount.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and in the town as well, like, our roads are a mess and we have trees falling down. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're doing this over here, but we're neglecting something else. So I'd like to get the full picture of where we should be, and then we can make decisions, you know, where we are, and then that's going to help us determine where the problems are and what we need to solve. So that to me is what feels important next, because that's going to determine what we start budgeting when we start the budget season. So I think to me that's the most important thing, understanding from the school perspective and from the town perspective. You know, and also if you can work with your department heads to understand, you know, what they're not doing, you know, by level funding every year, so we have the same picture that the school's been providing us.
So if we look at the calendar, we're in September now, so another quarter, you're talking about the first of the year. And, you know, that calendar up there tells us that on the 13th, we need to have a school committee submit a budget to the town manager. So what I worry about when I hear a lot of this stuff, though, is that you really have balance between short-term issues and long-term issues. You know, I feel like a lot of the conversation we're having here is really thinking more long-term, which I think is exactly the right thing to do. In the meantime, though, you've got a budget coming up. You know, in the old days, I could have called up Jim and kind of got an answer, but we've got a lot of change here, and I think, I suspect we're not really going to be able to do it this way. When I look at $1 million shortfall projected for next year, one question that I would have is, when are we going to know with some more precision what that number really is going to be, and can start to sort of understand what impacts that's going to have to the town?
And what's driving it?
Well, through the moderator, so we don't have to wait 90 days to have another meeting. And it doesn't mean you have to have another meeting in 10 days. I mean, but you already know what you need from the school. Why can't some sort of an executive summary be put together? Austin can put one together based on the department heads, and so can the school, and you can circulate that so that people at least have a base to help with the conversation. Much like John said, give me some details as to what you want, and then I'll give you what advice I might be able to do. I mean, why can't those documents be put together in a short period of time?
So what would you want to see in those documents?
Well, what I want to see is just what Caitlin was talking about. We don't have this, or as Harrison said, these are mandatory things from the state. You know, these are funded, these are not. If we had this money, then we could have I apologize if you already have it. We could have a robotics class here in school, which would do it. I don't know if you have one or not.
You have a great one.
Oh, okay, well, all right, then we could have a second robotics class. I haven't had anybody in school there for a while.
So essentially.
I know, you could bring Latin back.
Yes, you only offer one work language currently.
You offer Latin?
No, just Spanish. Just Spanish.
High school for that.
My two kids who graduated from Sutton, if they walked in here right now and you asked them, what's the best class you took when you were in Sutton, both of them would say Latin.
And so we actually, students are really forced to take
Of course, they're
Spanish.
lawyers, so maybe that's why, but they still talk about it
Yeah.
and how it's helped them and all their writing and everything else.
Yeah, we have like a world language requirement.
I'm sorry,
At this
I'm
point,
off-
we can
I'm
only
off
offer
point.
Spanish.
No, I just want clarification. So Pat, what you suggesting is that instead of us necessarily racing to meet again, maybe some type of very simple, streamlined report should be circulated.
What's going on? Then you have a base to talk about.
Then would we use that as the basis for the next meeting?
Depends on how well it's written.
Touche. No pressure to our manager or our superintendent.
Moderator.
Would it be the basis for the next, it sounds like I'm hearing two things. First, we have to do this year, and we all acknowledge that this year, it's gonna reflect what we have to do to meet the budget. Probably not gonna have a thorough analysis on things that we want. We may be able to get to it, but we're likely not gonna get to it based off this schedule. But it sounds like we could still have discussion on what we want, knowing that there's one item and there's a deficit that's coming up, and the two can't coexist. So if we get the list, or have some kind of summary bullet point, make it really simple, then we can have that discussion while collectively recognizing that this year's budget's going to be kind of the standard approach of let's do what we have to do to get the budget passed and make it even, knowing that the one list is going to come later.
So we're not going to be working for this year necessarily, we're going to be working for the future.
I don't think we can work for this year.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely.
Absolutely.
And it's not because don't want to meet on Saturday.
There's lunch involved, and cookies.
Well, all of that makes sense to me. I think that's my concern, is just the practical side of having to put a budget together for this year. The frightening part of knowing that today we're looking at a significant deficit, and what we're gonna do about that. I'm not gonna say that. It's a number that has to be dealt with, and it's not a small number. That kind of number, if that's really a deficit, that we can't close through budget methods, is going to have a real impact on the town. So the big picture things that are all great goals to sort of work on aren't as relevant to that problem right now. So those are the kind of balancing act kind of things we got to deal with in the short run. So if I can speak for others here, if we can have the kind of thing that Pat's talking about, where we can begin to work on a document that says, here's kind of our must-haves because of, the mandate kind of issues, and here's some things that would be sort of wish list sort of items. I suspect in the short run, that would be a document that would probably get updated over time. Maybe you can get the same kind of thing out of the town side. Sounds like that'd be useful to the committee in general, to start to move us forward. And then I think, I hate to put it on you, Austin, but I think at some point you gotta start talking about what you think that $1 million is gonna, what direction that's going. Again, I'm putting you on the spot. I don't know if you have thoughts about what your process looks like in terms of dealing with that.
So just, I guess one question, so before I answer that. Obviously, this says tentative at the top, right? Because I just copied what Jim put together last year and changed the dates, right? So in an effort to try to be responsive to some of the discussion, is there a desire to maybe bump this process up a little bit? I mean, obviously we're already in September, so we could bump at least the budget instructions up, for example. Maybe we can send out the instructions with the capital budget request, because that will get us some information from town departments a little bit sooner. Now obviously that's with respect to FY27. But at the same timeline, we can also be having discussions with departments about, well, what is the future of the department look like? There's obviously going to be some things, and the mandates is a little bit more challenging for the town because we don't have a lot of rules and regulations similar to the schools in terms of staffing. Perfect example is the fire department. The fire chief can give all kinds of NFPA regulations and standards, but it's a choice of the town. And the town has decided to run a volunteer call fire department. Police department's very similar. We have our collective bargaining, but there's no minimum staffing, for example, for a police department. There's best practices and standards. There's no minimum staffing for a municipal finance team. Some contract all of their municipal finance services out. So those are a little bit more challenging in terms of the requirements versus the wants and the needs, because I think as town government has grown through the years, it's because there's been maybe a desire among the community to just have more services, and we needed staff to fill those requests, right? So that's the only feedback I have on that, is I don't know if we'd be able to match exactly what you have for the schools, especially for the requirements component. I can certainly get a list, and I know it's going to be expensive, from town departments about what they want. I can already tell you, just based off of my assessment, where I think we're lean across all town departments, and I'll certainly have some feedback on the wants versus the needs there. But I guess also, on the town side, what do wants look like versus, again, maybe just the level services component, because we've been running at level services for a long time.
And in fairness to Austin, he's only been here for 2 months, so understanding the difference between wants and needs, that takes a little bit of time. In my experiences, if you go to department heads and ask them for that, you might not always agree with the line that gets drawn. So it takes, there's some nuance there. But that's, what I'm hearing from Austin is, the $1 million gap that's on the forecast, right, it's a town issue. It's not necessarily his issue. I think that's part of why we're here, is to help work through where we're going to go with that. But
Sorry, just to add, I know in terms of process, right? So our tentative tax recap hearing is the first select board meeting after town meeting. So that's where we're going to certify new growth, and the select board will go through their process. So based off of my comments about new growth, it's going to be a little bit higher than what we projected. So that will reduce our 900,000 projected deficit, for example, on that end, right? So we know it's going to be a little bit better. I just didn't feel comfortable putting in because it's not certified yet, right? And we don't have those numbers final. So we're going to have a little bit of a clearer picture. Obviously, we are just, well, actually not even yet, closing our first quarter. But I can tell you right now, for example, if you're asking how many building permits have we received, the answer is none. No revenue at all for the first quarter. So even projecting out some of the revenues right now, it's going to be a little bit early. Our highest commitment it comes in January for motor vehicle excise. So even some of those, we're just going to have to continue to have that conservative ideology on the budgeting. Which again is going to restrict, because of our current practice, it's going to restrict how we provide a balanced budget to you folks, because we are so reactionary to our available revenues.
Can I ask you a question on the pre-cash? Brian Gemmeros, Finance Committee, free cash 3.9. I don't know what the final number was. You said a little over 4 for fiscal year 25. What has it been the last 3 years?
Last year was over 4. This year it was just certified at 3.9. FY24 is 3.5. 23, 3 million. 22, 3.5. So since FY21, it's been over 3.
So why can't, and this is a lack of understanding, I mean, we have excess, free cash is strong. I know we can't predict that, but the last 3 years has been on average 3.8 million-ish, right?
Yeah. So remember that the top 3 categories of that, Brian.
Yeah, helping.
Can you tell me what you're going to get the town for investment income next year?
All right, that's one of them. Okay.
It's significant.
It would be helpful though for the group to have a breakdown of all that.
So one of the things.
So can you tell me what buildings will be built that we're gonna collect revenue this year that we can base our actual budgets, right? And those are the significant components to why we've generated so much free cash. Just local receipts alone for 3.9 million was 2.5 million of that. Motor vehicle excise was $700,000 or $800,000
That was
over what we
Tim's
budgeted. And that was his plug.
Yeah, that was.
I can't trust that.
So, you know, the largest contributions to generating free cash from local receipts are, you know, very much tied to how is the economy operating.
I mean, a car sales dealership here in town.
Yeah, buy new cars.
I just bought one.
Yeah, everyone please buy a new car and go on to the
And build stuff.
Or dog.
I would also say this, though, probably the largest contributor of free cash in the last few years has been free cash. You know, it rolls
Yeah.
over from one year to the next. So it's not that we're generating $3.9 million in free cash every year from operations. That number is really made up includes unused free cash from a previous period. So this is me personally. I'm not on any of these boards. I'm just the moderator. So you don't have to listen to me. One of the things that I did mention earlier, though, would be something from an educational standpoint to talk about free cash. Free cash is a really important number for the people sitting in this room to understand. So so maybe for the next meeting, if you could have something, again, I'm throwing it out, if there's agreement, that'd be great, something that talks about free cash and, you know, maybe just explain what it is, how it comes from, what it is, where it might be a good idea to use it, where it wouldn't be a good idea, where to use it, and why. I think that would help us a lot, because I think that question that Brian just asked is a really good one. If we've got $4 million in free cash and $1 million gap, why wouldn't we just fill it? And I suspect many people have that question, so it's probably worth having some a bit of philosophical discussion about what that means. Does that make sense to people?
I think it's important
Your
to
name?
point out that the free
Peter's on
cash,
it.
Peter's on it, the free cash is it's basically non-recurring. You don't know what you're gonna get.
Exactly.
You can't make a long-term commitment with something that you know you're gonna get,
Yeah.
don't know you're gonna get.
Yeah.
So it's limited on what you can do with it.
Right, so if our balance is 3.9 this year, what did you add free cash with the FY '25 budget? So it's rolling over, so we're not using the prior year's free cash. I think the state wants you, they want you to have a balance of 3 to 5% of your budget each year rolling into free cash, or do they look to you just having a certified 3 to 5% free cash based on the last budget?
No, I mean, so very similar to, you know, Dave's intro in terms of tri-boards. They have kind of best practices and recommendations, but that's set at the local level for what your policy level. But to give you an idea, so for FY '25, it was 3.9 million. We already had just under 1.2 in certified free cash. The year before, it was 1.9 million. That was the free cash balance.
So what was our
we had-
FY '25 budget? How much of our budget was left over? Because free cash is really the excess of revenue over expense.
1 million in unexpended appropriations. This year was less, it was about $500,000 in unexpended appropriations. And the remainder is excess revenue, local receipts, significant with local receipts.
So I'm still a little unclear about what we all think we should do for next meeting, or maybe what we should do in the interim between now and next meeting.
Through the moderator? What I was hearing and definitely supporting is there's a portion of that, we'll call it the education, that you will present, school committee will present, we will have some sort of understanding, and some of this, again, can be provided in documentation that we read and come to the meeting already with. But I would say under the education umbrella, I heard hearing from the school, but hearing on free cash, the capital stabilization fund, and the bond borrowing. That we need, that those are key understandings that we all want to have the same understanding as we go into deeper discussions. Then, I think it was Jesse's point, is if there's an opportunity to get a little bit of what Pat had said of some departments coming together on the town side of both understanding to get to this budget year, but also to set us up for these longer term discussions of You know, where are the gaps? What are we not doing that we would like to be doing? And do that on the school side as well. That the second portion of the meeting be reserved for diving into a deeper discussion of whatever documentation is able to be prepared on both sides. And that lets us then kind of lead to where our future discussion goes. So that's a recap of
That
what
was an
everybody
excellent-
else said.
That was well done.
Want to share the next meeting?
Write that on there.
Does everyone feel like we can fit that into a meeting?
Well, that was the point, that was, I think that might be too weighty of an agenda, because I would just throw it out there, does anyone want to give up a Saturday?
No.
All right then.
I think,
No, I can say that.
That would be Aaron said.
Well,
If there's food.
with that type of agenda, that's an all-day power session. But if we're gonna do an hour or two, maybe we do break it up into different modules.
But through the moderator, if we're already at $1 million deficit and we're at a level funded budget and there's any talk of override, we better have a projection for what this override we're gonna ask for at some point in the next 1 to 3 to 5 years would be to carry us through the next 10 or 20. Because the overrides have only passed every 20th year. And we're on that threshold right now. But if we don't do that work as the elected officials for our citizens, then we might sell ourselves short down the road. So the prior planning is going to set us up for a better future.
I understand that completely, but until I think we're all properly educated and we're all on the same page, I don't think we can have that conversation. That conversation is critical, I agree with you, but we gotta get to the point where we can talk about
Right,
it.
so we either have to self-educate or we have to educate as a group. And you've read the annual report, I've read the annual report. I can tell you how the recapitulation sheet works. I think that's a very important form to pull up so people understand how the tax rate is set, where the revenues come from, how everything that goes through that recapitulation sheet is approved through town meeting. I mean, most people in this room probably don't understand how that works, but that understanding allows you to have the broader discussions that you're talking about. So you can understand what the left and the right are doing. So you can do it on your own, it's all on the website. You have to jump between the different departments and look for the different documents. You know, you want the annual report they give us at the town meeting, town clerk's website. You want the audited one, finance website. You want the budget, town manager's website. Or you can just, they've done a great job, you can put it in the search bar and it's probably gonna pop up. But unless you're gonna sit there and self-educate yourself, some of these sessions are helpful for people to understand.
So before we go to an all Saturday session, I just recommend, let's start with a 3-hour session. Doesn't have to be an hour and a half. How about a 3-hour session during the week and go from there, and let's crawl before we walk, before we run.
Or a good document to read before we crawl, before we walk, before we run.
Well, I like that, a good document, absolutely. Well, I can go through as much detail as Christine does before the next meeting.
Well, you know, if the boards are comfortable with that, I could imagine how those topics could be covered in 3 hours. You know, honestly, if you were getting into so much detail that it was going to take more than 3 hours, I think you'd probably lose your audience. So we could probably make that work. So is everybody kind of comfortable with those items that were just laid out as kind of an agenda item for that meeting? And I know what you said, Pat, but I sort of feel like, you know, targeting around the first of the year might make some sense. Unless you guys feel it's urgent to try to go faster.
I would do it before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving?
Before.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, before sounds good, I agree.
You know, given family, you know, Thanksgiving might be the
So people have some to-dos for this meeting, and that's the real question is, can we actually be prepared for the things that are on the agenda item?
Yeah, I'll understand you.
Yeah. Could I make one quick statement through the moderator? I just want everyone, and I'm not saying anyone wouldn't, but with the new town accountant coming in the next few weeks, I think everyone, you know, I didn't get this same treatment down at the school because there was quite a mess, right? So we should all be cognizant of a new person stepping into the role. I don't want to overwhelm her, and I know it's very easy to ask for something from someone, and she's definitely a talented individual who would most likely get you what you want. but just give that person the time to acclimate to their role, because we are entering one of the busiest times for the town accountant and the school business office, right? So that person already has a lot on their plate. So if you can filter through and try to do some digging on your own first before dumping that onto that individual, I can tell you right now it would be appreciated, and I'm not trying to speak on her behalf, but I know how that feels, so.
Sorry, George Watson. I thought the first meeting, the next meeting would just be a discussion of what you want, or what the school wants. And then we'll touch on free cash and OPEB.
Capital stabilization.
Capital stat, and how it impacts the borrowing.
All right, well, let's,
General
I think
stat.
I'll sum that back, but I mean, we can start off with those two topics, and then maybe, to the extent we have time, we can cover something else, but, I mean, let's not be too aggressive, because it may just spiral out of control if we are too aggressive.
And hearing this group, discussions about free cash, that could get in the weeds. I could see that happening, so.
I think it needs to be a discussion of the mechanics of it,
Yeah.
not the details. I mean, just.
No, not the use of, I do think it's mechanics, and I think Austin will be able to give us a great overview of, dangers and risks of using free cash for the wrong reasons and things like that.
Right. And Austin said he could do it in 15 minutes.
Yeah, so we're gonna keep everything higher level. Higher level.
Yeah, no, it's, because, I mean, Harrison, you made a couple comments today about overwhelming the staff and stuff, but I think it goes back to what Jesse said earlier. We're not marching down to town hall to start demanding documents, and we can't. So, I mean, I think most of our interaction and learning is going to be in this forum and not through direct consultation with the town employees. So, with that in mind, we don't need to go into the details of full inner workings of the mechanics. We can get the high-level education to people here.
Yeah, it sounds like it may be different on the school department, but we're not asking for anything from the accountant on our board.
Not yet.
We go through the town manager.
So, would it be okay with everybody if we take this offline, set up a date through the town manager's office from here, and then we.
Maybe we coordinate with kind of like the leadership team like we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah,
Does that work? Yeah, that work for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think this was a really helpful meeting, and
Get closer. Can you adjourn for all of us?
I'll let you do it.
Yeah, we gotta do it individually, because technically we're all running individual meetings.
So we need a roll call for that?
Yeah.
Do we need a roll call?
Are we done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't actually think we do,
Oh.
but because it's not a hybrid format,
Oh.
or
The roll call vote was really.
I-
So we had just say, oh.
definitely, I would say you want to adjourn individually though, because you
Yeah,
opened
I'll
it
go first.
individually.
And for the Finance and Warrant Advisory, I'll accept a
Motion
motion.
to adjourn?
Adjourn, second. All those in favor, signify by
Aye.
saying aye. We're adjourned.
What's the count?
School committee motion to adjourn.
I made a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Six.
So that's 6.
All right, my board, select board.
Want someone to
Aye.
say no?
Oh.
We need a motion to
Motion
Second.
to adjourn. Christine Walken.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Roll call vote.
No.
Roll call vote, let's do it our way.
John Anderson, Norman Shabby, aye.
Christine Walken, aye.
Jesse Romanek, no.